Alrighty, so let's get into players I love for the 2024 NFL Draft. The first guy is Malik Neighbors out of LSU. Malik Neighbors, what a talent. This guy just gets it. And I think what I love about Malik Neighbors the most is you watch him play. This is a guy that you just like, you can tell there's just like a passion, and the way he plays, you can tell that like he puts in a lot of reps, he puts in a lot of effort. He has a drive to be great. And the way he plays with the mind. The way he plays, you can tell he's got the mindset he wants to dominate. This guy is just so electric with the ball in his hands, so good after the catch, just a dominant, excellent football player. Certainly one of the top wide receivers in this draft. Most people have him as a consensus number 2. Harrison is the number 1, but Malik Neighbors is going to be a really good player in the NFL for a long time. And his skill set, he's got a skill set where he can make an immediate impact in the NFL. So I absolutely love Malik Neighbors. He's the first player I have on this list of players I love. Number 2, Marvin Harrison. Marvin Harrison, you knew in that Rose Bowl game, him and Smith, if you rewind to that 2022 Rose Bowl game, 2021 season, when him and Jackson Smith and Jigba tore it up in that game, you knew that not only Jackson Smith and Jigba, but Marvin Harrison had a really bright future ahead of him. And all he did in 2022 was dominate, followed it up with another excellent season in 2023 after most people said, maybe he should just shut it down and not play in 2023. Comes back, stays healthy, has another really good season, displays a lot of just high-end level play on tape, makes some big catches in big games. And so Marvin Harrison comes in as another player I love for this draft, Opted out of the bowl game, which sucks. Didn't participate at the combine. But to me, Marvin Harrison's kind of just one of those guys where, okay, I went out, I balled out this season. I've put so much high-quality play and just high-quality, I've put so many highlights out there that I've really just shown out and shown people what I could do. So Marvin Harrison, Byron Murphy, the defensive tackle out of Texas. Byron Murphy, a really good player, just a dominant defensive tackle, a guy that can just overpower blockers one-on-one, just a complete mismatch one-on-one, and then has the ability to take on double teams, plays with good leverage, just a tough, gritty defensive tackle. Key part to why Texas was so dominant this year. He comes in as another player I love on this list. Caleb Williams, quarterback, USC. So this isn't really like kind of a fun take here because Caleb Williams is talked about as the number 1 pick, but some people are kind of shifting away. Not really backing up Caleb Williams as much, or I don't know if I should say not really backing him. They are more so like, yeah, Caleb Williams is good, but is he like, they're kind of like almost questioning, how good he can be in the NFL just because he didn't have as good a year at USC. But yeah, Caleb Williams is an excellent player. And I think he's going to be really good in the NFL. I think he'll do a lot of good things for the Bears. I mean, you look at the Bears. The Bears just need as much problems as the Chicago Bears have had. Getting a franchise quarterback like Caleb Williams, I feel like is going to clear up a lot of their problems. It's kind of amazing how that can happen. Like you look at, I always reference because there's kind of comparisons between Caleb Williams and Andrew Luck. You look at like the Colts. The Colts were kind of had a trajectory like they may become a bad franchise after Peyton Manning left, and then they get Andrew Luck, an elite quarterback, even though they had kind of a lot of no names on defense. They were really good for a long time. It's kind of the same situation with Caleb Williams and the Bears. The Bears, Jay Cutler had some nice seasons for him. He wasn't great by any stretch of the imagination, and then Mitch Trubisky didn't work out. So you look at the Bears and you're like, okay, yeah, we haven't got a quarterback for a while, but we've shown that we can put a fairly good roster in place, and that we're trying to build a good offensive line, and that we feel like we have a GM that has a vision for this team, and he's made some moves, and he's got weapons at wide receiver like DJ Moore. So the Bears are in a position where an elite quarterback could really help them that much more. I think that's what the Bears' thinking was. I think they're okay, we have a solid to good roster. Let's see if that's trade Fields, even though we don't. I don't think they necessarily dislike Fields. I think they were just let's trade Fields and let's see with this solid to good roster, if we if I call it swinging for the fences, not necessarily swinging for the fences. If we take a little bit of a risk here and take Caleb Williams number 1 overall, if we find that elite quarterback, is that what can propel us to becoming an elite football team once again? So I think that's the thinking with Caleb Williams. We got a solid to good roster. We've done some things to improve the defense, the offensive line. Can Caleb Williams put us over the top to become a playoff, not just a playoff team, but a threat to make a run to the Super Bowl? I know that sounds far-fetched because they haven't even taken Caleb Williams. First step is they have to actually physically make that pick. But I think that's the vision for the Chicago Bears is, can Caleb Williams can he be an elite quarterback? And if so, how much does that propel us forward? Another guy I love is Terrion Arnold, a cornerback from Alabama. Terrion Arnold, dude, this guy it kind of like Malik Neighbors. You tell the way he plays that he just has a mindset where he just wants to dominate a football game. That's what I get. That's the vibe I get from Terrion Arnold. You can tell that football means something to him, competing means something to him, and just playing at a high level week in and week out. I think Terrion Arnold's one of those guys where if he gives up, he could have a game where he has, 2 interceptions, multiple big hits, maybe a tackle for loss. He gives up a catch. You got to feel he's one of those guys where he thinks about that catch he gave up, and he thinks how he can give up no catches. And you think, if he loses a game, you think if he wins a game, you think yeah, well, we could have dominated him more. That's the type of guy. I don't know, obviously don't know Terrion Arnold personally, but you get the feel like Terrion Arnold's that type of guy. Like him and Malik Neighbors. I compare him to Malik Neighbors. They're guys where they just fierce competitors. You can tell that just going out and just dominating the competition sometimes isn't enough, and just they always think about how they could improve and just even dominate to a higher extreme. So that's what type of player Terrion Arnold is. Just an outstanding corner. And I think he's got a really bright future in the National Football League. Some other guys I like, Brian Thomas. A wide receiver from LSU. Brian Thomas, Brian Thomas just is a guy that's just a really smooth route runner. This is a guy that he's kind of got that sneaky long speed where he just kind of can sneak by corners. And what I mean by that, he kind of just a corner's covering him and he thinks he's with him, and then Brian Thomas can just when he wants to get that extra gear to just get past the corner and beat you deep for a big play. I think that's Brian Thomas's game. You look at so many big plays he had this year where even if the guy's playing off man zone, he kind of could just sneak past the defender. He's gliding the corners with you. They say even he's leaving. When Brian Thomas is even with the corner, he's gone. And some of these corners, I think, not necessarily confused, but you can tell that they were a little bit surprised. How'd he get by me? I was a little bit ahead of him. I was even or even a tad bit, a step ahead, and he just beats you. So Brian Thomas has that, and he's sneaky good after the catch too. I think that's where Brian Thomas is ranked amongst wide receivers is kind of really sums up Brian is kind of like a relation to his play. And what I mean by this is Brian Thomas considered the third, fourth receiver in this draft. He'd probably be my number 4, which sounds like you're kind of doing him a disservice. But you watch him play, you watch his tape, and you're like, man, this he's he may be not even the best. He might not be considered even the best receiver on his team, but you're like, man, this guy can play. Okay, he's a number 4 wide receiver, but he's no slouch. It's not a big drop off between him, Odunze, Harrison, Neighbors. It's this guy's going to be a good NFL receiver. And he has a chance to be on par with those guys. I think as of this point, right now, I think it's hard to put him in that tier with Odunze, Neighbors, and Harrison. I would say actually Harrison and Neighbors are in a tier of their own. I would probably put Odunze and Brian Thomas in the second tier, and then maybe I throw in Coleman in that tier. But I actually would probably do those 2 tiers. You got Harrison, Neighbors in that first tier, and the second tier Brian Thomas, from Odunze. Brian Thomas and Odunze are kind of similar guys, just, kind of taller, lengthier guys that they're just so smooth. They just understand playing the position very well. So that's what I really like about Brian Thomas. The guy just understands how to play the position. The guy just understands what he needs to do to beat defenders deep, what he needs to do to get open. So, yeah, I really like Brian Thomas. Another guy like Nate Wiggins, talked about Nate Wiggins a lot. Nate Wiggins, I think why I like him so much, I think he's got room to grow. I think Nate Wiggins has a chance to, I think he has a lot, I think there's a lot more meat on the bone for Nate Wiggins in his game. I don't think he's reached his ceiling. I think that's why a lot of NFL teams will gravitate towards Nate Wiggins, and I think that's why he might get drafted ahead of like other guys that are like top two, that are other guys that are considered above him right now by most people, like Wiggins. Like a lot of people, a good amount of people have Quinyon Mitchell, Terrion Arnold, even Cooper DeJean ahead of him, but I think some people will just look at the raw athletic ability. Like, I mean, Wiggins was the fastest corner at the combine, so I think a lot of people will look at that and say, yeah, there's more room to grow for Nate Wiggins. So even though he's our, we'll say Mitchell and Arnold went, and a team's drafting and they're in need of a corner, even though he's maybe our number 3 corner, like we need a corner here, and we believe that this guy, 4.28 speed with some size, some physicality, will tackle, with all those traits and in the ceiling or in the room to grow here, we'll take not a risk here, but we'll take Nate Wiggins here, and we believe within our coaching staff that they can get the most out of this guy. So I think that's kind of the case with Nate Wiggins. It's more so there's room to grow for this guy. Another guy like Cooper DeJean, Iowa. Cooper DeJean is a really good player. Cooper DeJean, to me, I was like, is he a corner? Is he a safety? But I'm like, this guy can play corner in the NFL. I have no doubt in my mind. This guy can flat out, his movement skills are outstanding. He's got a lean, muscular build. Some of the Iowa is shown too that they can produce, defensive backs that can play at a high level. You look at, Tyler Sash was a really good player. Iowa through the years has had, really good players coming to the NFL. So, I think Cooper DeJean will have a really nice career in the NFL. I like his game. He can tackle. He understands how to play zone coverage. He's got fluid hips. So, Cooper DeJean, even though he's not talked about as the top 1 or 2 corners very often, I think most people have him as a consistent number 3, 4 corner and believe that he could be a really good player in the National Football League for a long time. And then, I like Braylon Trice, too, out of Washington. Trice to me, I think, is a guy that's just going to really fit in the NFL. He looks like an NFL defensive end in college football. It's like I talk about how Rome Odunze looks like an NFL receiver playing college football. To me, I think that's why Braylon Trice is so good. I think this guy, you hear him talk, he seems like a pretty mature guy, and he plays like an NF. He plays like a veteran in college football. I know he's like a 4th-year senior or 5th-year senior. I know he's been in college football for a minute, but he plays like he just has a high football IQ. Like he understands that he needs to like at times when to just take on a block and hold his ground. He understands, that he understands not to get frustrated when he's getting to the quarterback and not creating a sack, and he the discipline not to rough the passer. I think that's the thing about Braylon Trice is, I know I've reiterated this before, his numbers weren't as good as people think. Like his production this past season, like you look at what was he like 11 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, which is a good season. But I think that's what people kind of associate with those numbers with him not being a dominant player. And I look at it as like when you watch his tape, like I need to watch more of his tape from this past year, and then I did watch him in person. But you look at his tape from 2022. Once again, numbers good, but not anything elite. You look at how many times he almost gets to the quarterback. It's crazy. Like you look at, there's so many plays where he's just like a step away from the quarterback. And it's like they always say, you don't have to be sacking the quarterback to affect a quarterback. Like just getting in the quarterback's face, even if it looks like the throw's off, that does something to a guy's psyche. That can get in the minds of quarterbacks. I think that's why Braylon Trice, don't be surprised if, I think it might be far-fetched that he's the second edge rusher off the board, but don't be surprised if he goes mid-first round and he's the second edge rusher off the board after Dallas Turner and who's the other top edge rusher? Or let's say, like Jared Verse or Dallas Turner. Even though I'm not as high on Verse, those guys may go maybe the top 2 edge rushers off the board. Shoot, yeah. let's just say hypothetically, Jared Verse and Dallas Turner might be the top 2 edge rushers off the board. But don't be surprised if Trice is that third guy off the board and he goes somewhere in that 15-20 range, 15 to 25 range. And a lot of people will be like a little bit surprised, but then they'll show the highlights and then there'll be the fans of the team, like say, for example, I don't know who picks in the 15-20 range, like the, trying to think of it, like whoever picks in the 15-20 range, the fans of those teams may go back and watch, like they'll watch highlights, but not even just highlights. They'll go back and watch some games of Braylon Trice, maybe all 22 if they have it, and be like, dang, this guy, the numbers weren't crazy, but the ability's certainly there, and the domination and the pressure he put on opposing offensive linemen, certainly there. So, yeah, and I know people aren't as high on the running backs, but I do love Trey Benson from Florida State. I don't know the way, like Trey Benson, like you talk about Florida State was a good team this year. Florida State, I think, was kind of like, it kind of goes into it's like fantasy football when you're afraid to draft a player just because they have so many good, like you're afraid to draft a receiver for fantasy football just because that team's got so many good receivers. It's kind of like Florida State had so many weapons this year, and there was so many other guys that could, or so many guys or a multitude of guys that could win them games that they didn't really need to utilize Trey Benson's skill set fully. So you look at Trey Benson, and you're like, yeah, he kind of like, I guess this kind of ties in with the Braylon Trice discussion. You look at Trey Benson, and you're like, yeah, he didn't necessarily have a big time year, but it's because they didn't really need him to have a big time year. You go back to 2022, he had a lot more productive season, and he really, this year there wasn't much of a drop off in his play. So yeah, I really like Trey Benson's game. He's a really good running back. I think he should be the first running back off the board. We'll see. Jonathan Brooks from Texas, the guy from Tennessee. Braylon Allen. There's some good running backs in this draft class. I think the running back class is being devalued a little too much. I think there is good running backs, but yeah, it is missing some, it is missing a lot of high-end guys, but there definitely is a lot of guys to like. And then, yeah, love Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers, the top tight end consensus in this 2024 NFL draft. Brock Bowers just dominated from day one in college football. He you saw him started right away, and he just makes plays. He's a terrific tight end. It sounds like, from what I hear, Brock Bowers' work ethic is phenomenal. So yeah, Brock Bowers is such a talented player, and his skill set is going to be so valuable for an NFL team. You talk about elite offensive line making teams great. Having a really dominant tight end also makes teams great as well. So Brock Bowers has a chance to do a lot of really big time things in the National Football League. But yeah, I'm gonna wrap with that. Thanks for tuning in to the Brant Parshall Show. Stay tuned for more episodes and clips from the show. Till next time, peace.